This is another special treat for a couple of reasons. It was exactly 2 years ago that Daniel showed up here in Monaco with an alpha version of Spotify and said, hey, I've got this interesting little music thing, and do you think we could do something with it? And I said, wow, that's amazing. Then a year ago, almost exactly, they launched Spotify, and lo and behold, a year gone, now I'm not sure if I have exactly the right numbers, you can correct me, 6 million registered users?
Yeah, it's about 6 million.
4 million tracks?
It's about 6, a little bit more than
so
6
6
million.
Okay, yeah, I mean, in fact, almost every day, if you go to the Spotify blog, they add another 75,000 tracks. I mean, who knew that there actually were 6 million tracks to have, however there are. And so it's a great pleasure. But that's reason number one why it's great to have Daniel here. Reason number two is that this event has always had a kind of old media, new media thing, and I love people who incarnate new media in their own personal stories. And Daniel is great. He's 26 years old. He's on his 4th company, including a number that you've heard of, like Stardoll, where he was the CTO. uTorrent, or what do you normally say? Is it uTorrent or MicroTorrent, or what's the
MicroTorrent?
MicroTorrent, which is a leading download technology. So he has some expertise on that side of things. And he also did a little company, Advertigo, I noticed. I mean, so this is someone who's 26 years old and has done 4 companies. So just everybody in this room that has other kinds of careers needs to kind of think about that and what that implies for how they do business. He's also, of course, Swedish, which seems to be the world's capital. I don't know, who knows why the Finns got cell phones and the Swedes got all the really fun things, but anyway, they did. And so we're going to talk a little about Spotify. This is on the record, by the way, so we can, if you're in the press, go away. And again, Daniel will be available. He's leaving tomorrow or midday or so if you want to talk to him, get a bid in early. I just have a real simple question, which is to start, with the exception of Steve Jobs, most of the people that have tried to go into the digital music business, and there are, as you know, lots of them, what made you think that you could do it? What was the thing that you had?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think there's been a lot of evolution in terms of music. There's been the evolution, or with lack of better words, there's been a eradication of the business where it used to be $38-40 billion industry, and it's currently around $17-18 billion industry.
That's the global music industry.
Yeah, that's the global music industry, and it's in 10 to 15% decline year on year. So it's quite obvious that something needs to happen. And piracy is rampant. There's a lot of people that are pirates, even more so than people are stealing music than they're stealing movies. In some countries where we talked about legislation, and in some countries where there's been new laws that's been passed, people are, again, the numbers of users that are now pirating are increasing, especially in Sweden. And what's kind of interesting is that we sort of feel that, at least in music, the underlying business model of just selling a physical copy or just selling a digital copy has changed. People are listening to more music than ever, and they're listening to a bigger diversity of artists. And they're discovering music through friends, not necessarily through radio. So we figured that the new music model that we need to monetize is the one about access to music.
Yeah, I should dial back. I blew it as a moderator here. I mean, for those of you who don't know Spotify, and if you live in the United States, you actually have an excuse because it's not currently legally available in the United States. It's ad-supported, legal. It's the jukebox in the sky, as I think Rob Glazer coined that term 10 years ago when he made his run at this particular experiment. And it means you can basically, any song you can ever think of, and there are 6 million, so there are none that you can't think of, you go to Spotify, you type in the name, bang, it's there, you press the button, down it comes, you don't pay anything. Every half hour or so you hear an ad, and
there's more ads than that.
But whatever. In any case, it's ad-supported streaming with a mixed freemium model, so you can also, for $10, and depending where you are, what those bucks are, it's different, you get a premium subscription that means no ads. And for extra points, it's just been announced there's an iPhone app. So you can actually download 3,000 songs to your iPhone and have them there too. So it's not just a streaming model. So it's a very, I mean, I can tell you as someone, one of those lucky Americans who actually has a Spotify Press account, it's an amazing thing. And everybody who uses it goes, whoa. So having said all that, and there's a great social aspect too, because you can make playlists. The whole thing is really about playlists. So I'm doing the commercial for him now. I do a playlist of my 50 favorite songs about California, and I put it on SpotifyList.com, and anybody who wanders along that happens to want to hear songs about California presses a button, and they instantly start playing as if they were on your very own machine. It's fabulous. And this gets back to what Daniel was just saying about ownership versus access. You know, I mean, and to somebody from Wired Magazine, I really love this because I think, wow, like, you know, who wants to own a bunch of MP3s? I see MP3s and I think of 8-track tapes, and I already have a lot of those in the closet. I don't want to have those anymore. I want bandwidth, and I want what I want when I want it. So anyway, now I've done the rest of my job. Sorry.
Yeah. So essentially, it's about access to music, and that's kind of where we think the music business model is in the future as well. And as you mentioned, you mentioned Rob Glaser that has a popular subscription service in the U.S. called Rhapsody. But the truth is that so far, none of these services has worked, with the exception of iTunes, no matter whether they were ad-supported or subscription-based.
So, I mean, do you believe that 10 years from now people will have MP3s?
I don't think the concept of MP3s will be known. I sort of look at URLs or URIs as the new MP3. I look at unique identifiable objects on the internet that people can link to, and that will be known in devices, that will be known everywhere. And what we want to do with Spotify is we want to be the platform that supports all of that, and supports so that you can manage your music within Spotify. And that can then transcend devices into your home, in a PlayStation 3 or Xbox, or it could be on your mobile device like the iPhone or Android phone that we're also available on. And essentially, you can just send that link to anyone, and that user can then listen to it.
Now, one of the fun things, I mean, a lot of people at this event are from the ad marketing side of the world. And one of the interesting things about streaming media as opposed to download media is that you can actually watch people's behavior. You can see what they listen to, how long they listen to it, which ones they listen to 5 times, which times they listen to once. And all of that, I mean, in theory, you've got a very robust environment for a whole variety. So what have you learned in the year that you guys have been up and running about people's behavior and consumption, if you want to use that word, of music, and how that is it what you expected, what's been surprising?
There's been a couple of things that's been surprising. I think we've seen people using content more than what most people imagine. People actually on Spotify are listening to hundreds of tracks per user on average per month. That equates to more than an hour of listening time per day. So what we've seen is... Do we know what an iTunes user typically downloads a month? No, I've got no idea about that, but I would imagine...
It's probably not hundreds. That would be hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, probably not. But what we're also seeing is that the fact that people are discovering much more music. So one of the things that I was surprised by was the fact that 30% of all playlists that people are creating are actually albums. So a lot of people talk about the album concept as being dead. I think the price point of the album might be somewhat dead, but people are definitely interested in hearing the compilations that the artists have chosen and the context in which the artists have put the songs together.
By a single artist or
by a single artist.
So people will make a Bruce Springsteen album that's different than the one that Bruce Springsteen made.
No, not at all. But rather, the people make a playlist of a Bruce Springsteen album, and they want to listen to that over and over again, that particular album. And that's, you know, in the hits-driven world where we see in iTunes and other stores, it's mostly hit-driven. It's mostly driven to singles and particular tracks that are popular. What we're seeing with Spotify is that people go more and listen to the back catalog. They'll go
so you got a long tail.
Yes, we got much more of a long tail than most other services. And we're also seeing that people are discovering content that they would have never discovered before because the sheer speed of which the service operates. So that sort of encourages people to find out more about content and discover more content as well. So all of this is ultimately something which I think is really positive because people are investing a lot of time in Spotify building their library.
What is it? Describe to people what an ad in Spotify sounds like.
So there's a couple of different ad units that we've got, and again, my way of looking at Spotify is that it's not really about the ad service and it's not about the subscription service. It's about the two in combination of each other, because the truth is the way these models works and the way the sort of industry works in terms of monetization, essentially, I mean, just look at U.S. as a market. The U.S. markets, I'm now guessing, but on an average basis, a music consumer probably spends like $20 a year on music. Try getting that kind of money back from an advertising user. I think only Google in the world can actually do that. But the combination of the two is sort of the key, because that way you can monetize the users well enough and still get them to discover more content, which is good. But the actual ad units itself, it's really simple. It's display ads, which is sort of standard ads.
In the browser?
In the actual player itself. What we do, which is sort of unique, is we got a lot of data about the user. We know the age, we know the gender, we know the location. We also know stuff like in which sort of mood that particular user is, depending on the content that they've listened to. There's other things that we can figure out as well.
How do you do that?
No, I mean, you can figure out through BPMs, and there's actually companies
BPMs are
beats per minute. It's sort of a way of figuring out how quickly the beat is.
So if somebody's in a sort of cheerful mood,
we will notice it quite easily. And there's also companies that classify songs as well, which we buy that kind of data from them to discover.
So you are what you listen to.
Pretty much. And the other thing that we're seeing is that actually your music taste in combination with demographic data is a pretty good way of targeting people. We can notice, for instance, if there's a preference for BMW versus Audi amongst a certain type of music consumer, et cetera, et cetera. And we're only really in the beginning of figuring these things out.
That's a pretty fine difference.
It is, but we're only in the beginning of figuring this one out. But there's a lot of stuff that we can do. And I mean, on the creative side as well, there's so many things that we can do. We've done some great ad campaigns where we're seeing click-through rates of 6-7%.
Do you do little jingles in the audio stream also, or is
Yes. So in between of tracks, every now and then we play audio adverts. We also play video adverts depending on the context again in which people are playing music. So, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if Avatar would show up on the Spotify service through an audio advert. And if you click on the audio advert, you can actually see the trailer of the movie and find out in which theaters it's playing closest to you. So there's those kind of things as well. So we basically support both display, video, and audio, whereas the biggest part of our business is sort of in the mix between display and audio.
A lot of famous disruptions involve taking an existing industry and collapsing its business model. A classic example would be Craigslist in the United States, where they kind of came in and they didn't replace a $7 billion industry with a $6 billion industry. They replaced a $7 billion industry with a $1 billion industry or less. You're making a pretty bold claim that you actually think the music industry can be a lot bigger than it's kind of the reverse. It's like, wow, there's all this money on the table and the music business is somehow leaving this. How does when you go into you spend a lot of time talking with labels. When you go in there and say, hey guys, I can triple your business, I can only imagine they're looking at you like, what, huh?
No, I mean, I think it's a sort of refreshing sign as well to go in with that kind of look. And it's about trying to explain to them, and they also got tons of research that we can draw conclusions from and that we can take part of. But essentially, my way of looking at this, and it's very simple. Take a market like UK, and then you take a percentage number, 1 to 5% of online display revenues generated in the internet space, and you take 1 to 5% of the radio industry revenues. And then you put it in the context of the UK digital music market, and you'll quite quickly find out that that probably represents 20% of the UK digital music market. So advertising in itself is actually a quite viable medium for music to go forward. The second thing, though, in combination of actually getting people to pay, it's an even more effective way. So that's the one end. The other end I'm looking at, look at China. In terms of behavior, we have, in most parts of the world, people are searching for things on Google or other search engines, and then they're emailing, and thirdly, they're using social networking sites. And then you take China, and the number one thing that people do is listen to music online. And then you look at the size of the music industry, and you realize it's nothing. And then you look at the size of Russia, Brazil, India, and the sizes of those music markets, and you realize that there's 100 million people in China alone that is middle class, that doesn't participate in buying records or buying digital music or access.
In other words, you're suggesting that they've never had the original model, and they probably never will.
No, exactly. But I'm pretty sure if you package the concept right, people will pay for it. They will pay either using their time by watching adverts, or they will pay by their money because it's packaged in such a way that they are actually comfortable around doing that. And I think physical, again, is one of those things. We're seeing smart artists like Trent Reznor and others figuring out how to turn their more hardcore fans into buying special concepts where there's unique items that they can buy, collector's items, and they might spend $200 buying that particular item. And there's the casual fan that wouldn't pay for the music, but will gladly pay in terms of their time by watching adverts.
So in other words, the case it sounds like you're making is that it's not the music industry you're taking on, it's the radio industry.
Sort of. But I would put it more, I would more put it in the context of, I think partly the music industry wants change. It wants to move in the direction, but it's at the same time, as you talked about, there's a lot of disruptive businesses like Craigslist and so on. They didn't have to work with the existing industries. One of the things that we have to do is we actually have to work with the industry. And one of the things that I've realized over the past year is that it's not only about dealing with record labels. The truth is that there's artists as well in all of this, and you have to speak to the artist. And the artists, in some cases, might actually benefit from obscurity by not being in a service, because for somehow their particular demographic actually goes out and buys the physical products. But they wouldn't if it was available for free.
Because in China, people do listen to like the radio. I mean, that is definitely, that's what they think of as music.
Sure, but at the same time, you've got the top 100 concept, which Google introduced as well in China, where basically you can download free MP3s ad-funded, which is not launched anywhere else in the world.
Okay, I'm going to make my plea once again for questions from the audience and wave your arms. So if any of you are out there, I see one in the back. Look at that. Shoot. Could you speak up so we can all hear?
So I think, one of the reasons why we did so was the fact that we introduced the mobile tiers. That was exactly at the same time. And one of the things we wanted to be very certain of, it's one thing having all of these free users that were showing ads for it. It's another one when there's actual customers paying money for it. One of the things that we wanted to make sure was the fact that we could actually scale the service. And we were surprised by the enormous response that people were having for the mobile products. And I don't know if you know, but we announced the deal with 3 a couple of weeks ago that went live this week, where you essentially can buy a phone that is music enabled now for £35 a month. You get pretty much free voice, free text messages, and free music for £35 a month, including the phone. So there's a lot of these kind of things that are coming up as well, and we just wanted to make sure that the user experience that we could give was the best one. And the truth is, we're adding tens of thousands of users still every day.
Well, let's get to the fun question. As I mentioned earlier, you've now been in Northern Europe and the UK for a year. You've mentioned a number of occasions that USA soon. What's the hang-up? Why is it so hard?
So I think there's a couple of things. First and foremost, we have to understand that the U.S. industry in and by itself has a much bigger revenue that it needs to sustain. There's a lot more to lose. The other thing is that it's a much more fragmented market in the sense that publishing is a much bigger part of the business. Here in Europe, we have to deal with collecting societies in each country, but that's one.
Could you just explain what's there between publishing and recording rights?
So there's different layers of rights, and the different layers of rights is everything from recording rights, which the record labels normally own. There's of course the performing rights, which in many cases is handling by the collecting societies or bodies that are sort of organized like collecting societies. Then there's collecting societies, and in some cases there's also publishing companies. And essentially in Europe, the model works that you sign up with the collecting societies and the performing societies and the record companies, and then you got a service. In a country like the US, you not only have to do that, but you also have to sign up with each publishers. And there's thousands of publishers that you have to sign up. And in Spotify's case, it's a quite radical new message to the market in the sense that we're not only asking for a free service, but we're also asking of a paid service that can do under sustainable rates. So, just to be honest with you, the market standards for many years has been a penny per play, and the penny per play concept.
That's kind of a radio.
Yeah,
it's
actually even more so than that. It's something that introduced in the digital space, and it's something that has sort of come across. And the logic behind it, obviously, is that it takes roughly, if you look at the retail price, it takes 99 times for someone to make back the same money as it was purchasing a CD. And obviously, most people don't listen to a track 99 times. My response though is, well, people listen to much more content this way, and they're listening to much bigger diversity of tracks. But essentially, the penny per play, my point is, if you look at an advertising model, that means $10 CPM with 100% sell-through with one ad unit. There's not a single company in the world that can make that work. So,
what would you? What's your do you have a dream kind of version of what the right price should be?
No, I don't. I think it's something that can increase over time. For me, it's not about the effective monetization of one stream. My objective is to build a company which gives artists, to start with, $1 billion a year in revenues. Because the truth is, there's only one company out there that does that or more, and that's Apple. And then there's nothing, and then there's nothing, and then might be Amazon MP3 store, and then there's nothing, and then there's nothing, and then there's nothing. So the music industry in itself needs another $1 billion industry, and that's what we're dedicated to building.
I'm going to caricature you as a kind of geeky guy. Are you shocked by what you've had to deal with in the last year in terms of going into and doing these kind of deals? It's a very different. It's not like coding. It's
kind of different from coding. I usually joke and say that I actually had hair when we started all of this, and now obviously I don't.
That's not true.
Yeah, well, I had some at least.
One of the proposals. In fact, that penny a play. That's actually in many jurisdictions. I think that's almost a legal, regulatory set price. It's what universal licensing. Is that an answer there? Is to do kind of what they've done in the U.S. If you want to start a radio station, you don't have to go around and do all these deals. You just boom, start up your station and start writing checks. Do you see that happening in digital?
No, but I definitely hope that there will be. I don't want to have my competitive advantage being that I got a better rate than someone else, and I don't think I've got that position today. I want to have my competitive edge being that I built a better product and therefore more people are using my product.
Well, in fact, right now your competitive edge is being able to do deals with record companies.
It is to somewhat of an extent because it's such a lengthy process. It took us 2.5 years to get the licensing done. But what I hope is that ultimately someone will figure this model out, and that will open up the markets for more people to actually come in. And I think we're seeing that to a certain extent with people like Nicholas and Jonas coming in now with the service in the subscription space, and there's more to come. But ultimately, my belief is that I think we'll get the music industry to work by having a mixture between free and paid.
We got a question out there.
So just a quick one, actually. You're focusing very heavily on the developed markets. Do you have a strategy that's going to take this where piracy is rampant in places like India and China?
Question is there a strategy for India and China, emerging markets, where piracy is a really big problem?
Yeah, so we're definitely focusing on a market like China, for instance. We don't have a clear plan for India, but China is definitely high on our priority list. And we also took investment a while ago from Mr. Li Ka-shing, which is one of the Hutchinson Vanpoa guys, but also one of the leading guys in China through Tom and other services as well. So for us, China is a hugely important market. We see it as a very developing market. I mean, I think it is about 80 million people in China that actually has broadband today, and that number is growing, month by month. And obviously, their economy is growing as well. So it's a very important market for us, and the other emerging markets are very important for us as well.
Well, speaking of broadband, same question basically that I asked Jim a minute ago. These 3 strikes legislations, in a funny way, that would actually, if something that discouraged piracy would be good, or I mean, I should dial it back. Better than piracy, if I remember right, was one of your 2 years ago. Was what you were talking about as a design goal for Spotify. If somebody came along with a thing that really stomped piracy, are you worried that labels are going to go back and say, okay, well then we don't need Spotify because we can just do iTunes?
No, I don't think so. And I mean, funnily enough, we're operating in markets where laws like this have been passed. And what we're seeing is that one of the good aspects with passing laws like this is the fact that people are aware that it's actually illegal and that it's not right to steal content. And therefore, they start using legal services like Spotify, and they're moving into that. And that's what we've been seeing in Sweden.
I was going to say, Sweden is probably your best case, isn't it?
It is by far.
What's happened to piracy in Sweden in the year Spotify's been around?
So piracy, it started out by piracy decreasing by, I think the numbers was something like 90% the first month after the law was passed.
90.
Yeah, 90. It was, the first month was just a huge drop in piracy.
What percentage of the adult population of Sweden are Spotify subscribers?
So we're currently at 17% of the population, not the broadband. 17, yeah, correct. And we've got a huge penetration, and together with other partners, we've been growing the industry. I think the Swedish digital music industry has now been growing to, it's grown 50% this year. So it's a huge growth.
And that's principally ad revenue or premium subscribers, or which?
It's a mixture between the two of them, but it's basically 50-50 between ad and the subscription revenue.
And that's our best. I mean, that's what's the UK? UK is what, 1 million registered?
No, it's actually more than that. It's about 3 million.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a huge market for us.
Wow. Okay, and so you can actually point to this and say, hey, it works. It stops piracy.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies that says that Spotify stops piracy. We're seeing that not only do we do that, but we're actually increasing the digital music market by bringing revenues that weren't there for the music industry.
So then why aren't the American labels going and sign up now?
No, I think the labels want to get there. They're very excited about the service. For us, it's mostly, we're still a startup, and as I mentioned, in terms of the publishing side, there's thousands of publishers that we need to sign up and educate about the market. And even though we've done a pretty good job in Europe. The truth is that the US is a different beast, and most people are not aware of the service in the US. So we have to educate the market.
Okay. I guess my final question would just be the ownership, back to the ownership versus access, because I think that's really that's the radical shift here. I mean, we've been in a 100-year period. I mean, ironically, I think before recorded music existed, nobody thought about owning it because you couldn't own it. And then there was this period from the start of the phonograph till now when you could own it, and that was the way. Back to me. I mean, do you think ownership of music is a I was going to say a dodo is a doomed concept?
No. So my view of the music industry is that the music industry has a bright future in the sense that there will be a lot of different business models. There's the model around selling music, owning music, which will work on content that people actually like. If I'm a big fan of someone, I don't mind actually buying an item. It might not be the CD in itself, but it might be in a package with the CD, with the leaflets that you can actually...
Do you guys get, I mean, when a record is released, do you get it as soon as it's available on iTunes and any place else?
Yes.
So there's no windows, there's none of that stuff?
No, in the most cases it's no windowing. So most of the stuff is up there pretty much as soon as it's released in the store.
So you're not at any competitive disadvantage in that sense where there's a big... And
No.
why haven't... I mean, just curious, why wouldn't the record companies, for instance, want to maintain that?
So I think in Europe so far, people have realized that the only side effect which this is that people will go to the pirate services instead and they will download the content. Because again, the windowing content... It's not like you're actually hurting Spotify itself that much.
Mm-hmm.
What in most cases happens is that the user turns from Spotify and goes into a pirate service to get the music anyway.
You said overnight in your 1 year... Daniel wrote a very nice blog post on the 1-year anniversary. You can see it on the spot called Overnight Success Takes a Long Time. Do you worry that being... as successful as you've been is making it harder, for instance, to talk to, say, record labels in the United States because they say, aha, these guys are rich, they've got tons of money, let's go for a killer deal?
No, I don't think so, but I definitely think that it's been more of an educational problem because I think we're fortunate enough to be small enough in the first place to get into people that were dedicated to run the deals through. And in this case, there's so many people that are interested in what we're doing and they want to know about it and they want to have a say in it as well. So there's definitely more stakeholders this time around, and there's a lot more senior stakeholders as well that want to kind of from a macroeconomical perspective see what the impact is. It's not just a deal. This is a macroeconomical thing that might change their business, and therefore it takes longer time.
Big old media does work slowly, doesn't it?
Well, in some cases, but at the same time, we're pretty much on time and on track for delivering a service in the U.S. And
so when should we mark our calendars for?
What I've said all along is that we're looking at the end of 2009 and the beginning of 2010, and I think we're on track for that. I don't think we'll reach it at the end of this year, but we look on track for the beginning of next.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. We're going to take a 2-minute break this time because it's getting a little bit later, and then we're going to have the inimitable Michael Wolf with 2 Fs up here to talk about celebrity journalism and the internet age and the seeming amazing convergence of those two things. And so take a quick break and then go to the bathroom or whatever, order another drink, and then we'll be on. Thank you.